Welcome to Ground Rules, Employment Law Over Your Coffee Break. My name's Pam Howland, and I'm here today with Jennifer Walrath and Doug Plass, and we're talking about unlimited paid time off. Is it a great perk? Is it an amazing way to boost productivity and to show trust? Or is it an HR nightmare filled with potential risk and liability? That's what we want to talk about a little bit today. It seems like we've had more and more unlimited PTO issues pop up in the recent future. So we want to talk through some of those with you today. So what is unlimited PTO? Jen, Doug, you guys want to jump in and kind of give your spin on that?
Sure. I mean, I think even myself at one time, when you say the term unlimited PTO, you think, well, okay, I can just be gone from work whenever I want, as much as I want. But really, that's not quite what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is a policy that would say you do have to ask for the time off. But in terms of kind of counting how much you get to take in, say, a given calendar year, there isn't necessarily a specified number out the gate, right? So instead of someone saying you get, 14 business days of vacation every year to take whenever you want, but ask for permission, you do have to ask for permission, but maybe you get to take, 21 or 30 or, some unspecified amount. So really it just means that every request you put in kind of on a case by case basis will get assessed and either granted or denied. It is what we're talking about today when we talk about unlimited PTO.
So what's unlimited is what you can ask for, not what you can get.
Yeah. Yep. So is it a great perk? Is it a good thing for employers, or is it a negative? We asked our summer intern to help us with some research on this issue, and she actually found a study from the Harvard Business Review that found that people who took fewer than 10 vacation days per year had a 34.6% chance of receiving a raise in a 3-year time period, where people who took more vacation, more than 10 vacation days in a 3-year time period, had a 65% chance of receiving a raise or bonus. So, suggesting that when employees are taking more time off, maybe when they come back, they're more productive, they're more rested, they're more successful in their work. What are some of the other things that would bolster the conclusion that you should consider an unlimited PTO policy?
I was just going to throw in, I don't have any statistics to back this up, but I do imagine that it is something where if a prospective employee or an applicant sees unlimited PTO, on the job description as something offered by the prospective employer, that probably looks pretty appealing. So I think it's maybe something, especially, I think increasingly over the years, that a lot of employees appreciate if they see that and they perceive it to be a very good thing. So, kind of workplace culture. Also, people, I think, like the feeling of trust that places in them, that they can kind of manage their own schedule and are reliable and dependable and can get their work done. So that could be a benefit depending on the nature of your workforce in your workplace.
And the employer doesn't have to worry about accruing time off and kind of keeping track of all that and kind of all that record keeping. And then importantly, doesn't have to worry about paying those accrued hours off if the employee leaves, as is required in most cases.
I guess I would throw in there, providing you've got a good policy, right? Like that is always something you definitely want to address in your policy is, what's going to happen if somebody leaves and they've got accrued PTO and vacation. We've definitely seen wage and hour disputes over that. And I think that the unlimited PTO benefit could definitely create mischief there if you don't have it in a solid policy that talks about the different contingencies and exactly what's going to happen or will not happen when an employee separates from the company. So how about pitfalls? Like, are you guys seeing in your practice or hearing about pitfalls, like things that go wrong when an employer offers unlimited PTO?
I mean, the very first thing that came to my mind is, okay, you say unlimited PTO, go to your supervisor, ask for the time off. Supervisor gives you the thumbs up, sure, go ahead, or gives you the thumbs down, sorry, no, you can't have it. When you have different supervisors across a company getting those kinds of requests, what if they're handling them differently? And what if you end up with some employees who have had all their PTO requests granted without any kind of question? And maybe you have another employee in a similar job who has had, half of their requests denied. So potentially, again, you can kind of fix this or help this with a good policy, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later. But a potential pitfall is just that with this kind of approach, there could be variability in how and when it gets granted. And that could just lead to people, perceiving unfairness, and maybe then having a basis to say, as we talk about a lot here on this podcast, the real reason why you deny my PTO is that I'm the only woman in a team of men, or I am the only person over the age of 40 in the team and everybody else is younger and you give them all the time off and make me work. So it just opens the door to possible claims if it's not being administered in a consistent way.
And then I think even if it is being administered in a consistent way, even if all your supervisors are handling these requests exactly the same, what's different here is that, individual employees will think about this differently and use it to a different rate. So you're going to have a situation where you have one employee, which is great. I'm going to ask for this as much as I possibly can, and other employees that are saying, that are kind of less willing to say that their job is handled, I guess, and request this thing. And then, that can create all sorts of problems, right? It can create cultural problems, definitely in the workplace, where people are resenting the people that are actually taking the time off. So how much time off a person actually gets is not dependent on the company policy as much as their initiative and their willingness to do it. And I think that's an issue.
And despite the Harvard Business Review study that Pam mentioned earlier, I also could see scenarios where you have someone who takes full advantage of an unlimited PTO policy, but then finds themselves getting dinged when it comes to performance reviews or, promotions, things like that. So it does make it, I think, trickier. It could make it trickier for things like performance management. How do you really assess advancement opportunities for people when there perhaps has been a big difference in how frequently someone has been out of the office taking advantage of this unlimited PTO?
I have two kind of big thoughts, I guess, on what Jen and Doug were just talking about. So I love that Jen mentioned the importance of supervisor consistency, because that's something we talk about all the time in the employment law training arena, right? That's why your supervisors need trained. That's why you need good policies. That's why the supervisors need to know the policies, right? Is because if you ever have supervisors who are enforcing policies in a way that's kind of random, haphazard, and not uniform, it creates the risk of unfair treatment, discrimination type claims, right? And we talk a lot about just that basic concept of fairness in the employment law arena, right? Like we see many claims come in the door, and that is really the basis for those claims is I was treated unfairly. And something like this, without a lot of thought and a lot of training, education, and having everybody on board, that could certainly give rise to a fairness complaint like that. So you've heard us say it say a million times, training, 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 right? Like we love training. And this is one more area where you would definitely need to make sure your supervisors are trained and they know exactly, the ins and outs of a benefit like this. So you also heard Doug talking a little bit about people leaving, taking advantage of the unlimited PTO, and maybe, how do you manage performance in a situation like that, right? Like, when does someone taking advantage of the policy start to look like they're not performing well enough? That again kind of segues to something we frequently talk about, which is the need to make sure expectations are clear, and that you have updated job descriptions, right? That employees know, if you're not going to meet these quotas, then, maybe if you take unlimited PTO, it's going to be an extra problem, right? You still have to meet the expectations despite having this unlimited PTO available.
And the other place too that could get sticky with this kind of policy is other kinds of leave, right? So if you're large enough or a public entity, you might be covered by the Family Medical Leave Act. Maybe you have someone who's asking for an accommodation for a disability under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, things like that, right? And would that leave be paid or unpaid? And for example, like under the FMLA, it is unpaid leave under the law, but if a company offers paid leave, frequently people will run that leave concurrently at the same time, right? So they can have their job protected leave under the FMLA, but also still be getting paid with PTO. So just thinking through that, right? If you're considering having a policy or have a policy of unlimited PTO, then are you willing, if someone's on FMLA leave, to pay them for that entire leave? Because if someone puts in a request at the same time as their FMLA request for PTO for that same period of time, and that falls within the parameters of the policy, you're probably going to have to be paying them during that time period.
Another thing you would want to address in a policy, right? And if you don't want that to happen, then that's certainly the way protected leave, sick leave would be handled under the policy should definitely be articulated in your policy.
Yeah, and one more thing that I was thinking about that's kind of a pitfall, I think, is that, what do we have leave for? Like, why do we take vacations? Well, it's usually to get away from work, unwind, refresh, come back rested in some way. If you have a policy that's based on an employee having to make sure that their job is taken care of while they are gone, what you're going to end up with is people that aren't unplugging entirely. And maybe that's what you want, but I don't know that the employees get the benefit of the vacation, nor do the employers in that case.
Yeah. I was going to circle back too. So Jennifer was talking a little bit about the intersection between unlimited PTO and the ADA. And to me, that is probably the one area I've seen mischief by these unlimited PTO policies the most, is when someone has a serious medical issue of some type where they need paid leave or unpaid leave because they can't work because of it. Which, I think generally speaking, if you've got an unlimited PTO policy, maybe that means you're willing to give that within certain parameters. But the problem becomes, what if someone is gone 2 months, 3 months, 4 months? Is it going to be harder to show the undue hardship piece from an accommodation request like that if you've got a policy that says unlimited PTO is available?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it could be. So I think that is definitely something you want to think through too. So how about takeaways? Like, what do you guys think, or, any other takeaways related to this unlimited PTO concept? Should an employer do it? Shouldn't they do it? And what should they be thinking about if they decide to go down that path?
I mean, I think one thread through our discussion today has been, if you decide that it makes sense for your workplace, make sure you write a good policy. You're going to want to set out the process for requesting the leave, make sure that whoever has the responsibility of reviewing and approving requests for leave understand how that works, what they're supposed to consider. You might even put in the policy for transparency the kinds of things that, may be considered in granting or denying a request for PTO. I think that's helpful for employees too, right? To understand circumstances where, they may not get it even if they ask for it. We also, even though it's unlimited, quote unquote, you might put in ballpark ranges of kind of what you are willing to agree to, and that may be over the course of an entire year, amounts of time that roughly the company would consider reasonable time off. Again, not saying that's the cap, but approximately this amount. And I think give some thought to for how long at one time are you willing to have employees out of the workplace and gone? Are you willing to have someone out for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, 3 months at one time? Essentially, does it matter, the duration of any given out of the office period of time? And just kind of making sure employees understand and that your supervisors understand, HR, whoever, the people who are handling these requests. And then the other thing too is, do you even want to call it unlimited PTO? Because in some ways it's not actually unlimited, because there are circumstances where you might be telling an employee no, and you don't want to give the impression that that's unusual or inappropriate. So you could maybe call it something else. When we had, Pam mentioned we had our summer intern doing some research. Some of the suggestions that came up were like flexible PTO or personalized PTO. Maybe there's some other good term out there that you could use. But, really just to make clear, we are more flexible in how much PTO we allow people to take, but it isn't just a free for all. And there are some guardrails around when you can be gone and how you request that time and how we assess those requests.
Yeah, and I think employers that oftentimes want to enact one of these policies says, "Oh, unlimited PTO, great! I don't need much here, just that," And we're telling you that's not going to work. You're gonna need.
You're probably gonna regret it if you have like a very short paragraph in your unlimited PTO policy.
Or no paragraph.
Yeah, spell it out in a way that people understand it, right? I mean, I think, in talking to friends of mine that have unlimited PTO, in quotation marks, something that's clear to me is that nobody really knows exactly what it means. So write a good policy so you know what it means, and so your employees do as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and training, again, like some of these concepts, like if your leadership team's analyzing unlimited PTO, but they don't understand anything about disability accommodations, probably not going to be able to give the full consideration to exactly what kind of pitfalls this policy could have. So training, making sure your leaders are trained, supervisors trained. And again, where we've seen problems with this is when the policy is either non-existent or not well crafted to take various contingencies into consideration. So make sure you're going to have a policy if you're going to do something like this.
And the last thing I kind of want to throw out too is, even before you get to what the policy may contain, to really take a little time and evaluate whether or not this kind of policy makes sense for your workplace. Because even if it does make sense from a culture standpoint, for example, if the majority of your employees are hourly, non-exempt employees, for various reasons, this may not make the most sense for that kind of a workplace. So just making sure you've thought through how it will actually function in your workplace if it's put in place, and you may need some help with that. But I think that's a worthwhile exercise to really think about it from a compliance standpoint, and then also, from a cultural standpoint too. But give it some thought whether or not it really makes sense, and does it really help you, help the employees, help the workplace. And then if it does, do the legwork to write a good policy and can communicate it well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what I was thinking is like different industries. I think there might be some where this could be effective and be a great motivator, productivity booster. Others, not so much. So maybe do some research, talk to other companies in your industry that have implemented programs like this and see really what types of issues are coming up and what types of success or failure that they're having with policies like this. So that's it for us today on ground rules. Don't forget, if you're thinking you need training on some of these issues, we have our book, Our Law for Leaders, the roadmap every leader needs to follow to avoid claims and lawsuits. We got a lot on the ADA in there. That ADA thread runs through, I feel like, almost every podcast, almost every issue, because it's so big. So make sure you're getting the training you need on that. And stay tuned for other types of training we offer. We also have our Law for Leaders recorded content or live content. Last week we had a supervisor training. Coming up in September, we have a workplace investigations training. All that stuff serves to make your leaders better, your supervisors better, and to help you avoid claims and lawsuits. So that's it for us today. See you next time.
Ground Rules hosts and guests are not providing legal advice in this podcast. Do not act upon any of the information discussed in this podcast without first consulting a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction.